Jacob Rees-Mogg, we were elected at the same time. I talked to loads of people from different parties, but I never had a conversation with you. So I'm really interested to do this interview because I'm hoping to break down a few of my own, perhaps, prejudices about you. You have been described, and I can't find out who first said it, as the honourable member for the 18th century. The suggestion being that you're somehow otherworldly, old-fashioned, out of date. Do you feel comfortable in the modern world?
Oh yes, I don't mind being called the honourable member for the 18th century. I think there's a lot to be proud of in British history, so I'm very happy with that. But there are many advantages of the modern world, which particularly we notice in a slightly cold winter, that we can just switch electricity on and our houses warm up. They couldn't do that in the Georgian era. They had to lay fires and get logs in and all these sorts of things. The modern life is much more comfortable than the 18th century life.
So I've talked to you about my sort of preconceptions, and there are a number of preconceptions about you. What do you think people most get wrong about you?
Oh Lord, I'm not very good at this actually. I don't terribly worry about people's preconceptions. That what am I trying to do in politics? What are you trying to do in politics and in public life more generally? Is get across the arguments you think are important, make the points you think are most valid, and doing it as well as you can. And inevitably some people will warm to what you have to say and some people won't. And that's as it is.
A few of the reasons why you've been in the news this year. Let's talk about working from home. So in the spring of...
Yeah, I might quibble with the word working, but never mind. People have certainly been at home.
So you got a bit of stick for when you were a minister based in the Cabinet Office in the spring of this year. You popped round a card on people's desks where they weren't sat there, civil service desks, saying, "I look forward to seeing you in the office very soon." Do you think that might have been intimidating?
No, not at all. It was a sorry you were out card, of which you and I have both delivered thousands over the years to constituents when you go around saying, sorry you're out when I called, and when I call again you'll be in. That's not intimidating. I only put out 3 of them as it happens. Oh. We had a Freedom of Information request saying, how much money did he spend on this campaign? Turned out it was under £1. It was making the point. And I am very concerned that public services are not being delivered properly because people aren't in work. We know that from the DVLA, we know that from the Passport Office. There was a report in the newspapers very recently saying that some of the delays at the Passport Office were caused by people working from home. You need people in the office to deliver services, and I think we've found there have been poor public services from people working from home. I mean, you've seen a GP working in Cornwall only seeing people on Zoom a couple of 100 miles away. This is not a satisfactory service for the British people who are paying the highest taxes in 70 years. And the public sector needs to be delivering proper services, it needs to be in work.
Is there a role for flexible work, in a hybrid perhaps?
There definitely is. There are some roles that are very well suited to working from home. So a newspaper columnist, for example, can probably do most of his or her work from home. There are some accountancy jobs that may be very well done from home, but actually providing a direct service to the public probably requires you to be in the office. I also think it's important for people early in their careers to learn and develop, and possibly early in their careers they're not earning that much money. Being at home isn't quite so comfortable. There's a stage in life, people in their 40s and 50s who've become relatively senior, for whom it may be all very nice being at home, but I don't think it works economically, and I don't think it delivers properly in the public sector.
We're about to enter, we're in a period of strikes, rail strike action for the coming weeks. If a worker said, come on, it's really, really difficult for me to make it into the office during these rail strikes, you'd be sympathetic?
Absolutely. I think, look, I was the leader of the House of Commons that introduced remote sessions for the House of Commons, not because I wanted us to move to being a remote parliament, but because Parliament had to carry on sitting. And the choice was, do we have a long recess and not hold the government to account, or do we do it on Zoom? And I was really keen that we should have Parliament meeting. And the Speaker, who is a great man, agreed with this, and this will astonish you that the member of the 18th century was one of the people pushing for it most strongly, because although I was then a member of the government, I still thought the government should be held to account. So if you can't get into work for some reason, whether it's a rail strike, the snow, or a pandemic, that's different. But as a matter of routine, it's second best, and best is being in the office. I was also very conscious, actually, during the pandemic, in the Houses of Parliament, that who was there? The cleaners were there, the security guards were there, and not many other people. So the lowest paid were the ones, if you thought that it was a big risk travelling, which people did initially, who were taking the risk, who were having to go in, and the people who were rather better off, a little more comfortable, were the ones sitting at home, and some worked very well, not everybody did.
You are a man of strong faith, you are a Catholic, that means that you are opposed to same-sex marriage. It means that you are opposed to abortion in all circumstances. Those are not majority views in this day and age. Do you feel a difficulty holding those views? They're not even your government's views. They really are sort of relative. They're minority views.
And I'm very concerned about euthanasia. There's a report in the papers from Canada about it going up to 10,000 a year, and suggesting extending it to the mentally ill and to potentially children over the age of 12 who are considered mature enough. And this is quite terrifying about the lack of concern and value for life. But equally, I'm not putting myself forward as an Ayatollah. I am not trying to enforce my views on a democratic country that doesn't want them. I'm going to express them, and if other people agree with me, then that's something I'm in favour of, obviously. But I'm not saying that my views should be the views of the Conservative Party, let alone that I should force them on a country that doesn't want them.
Do you ever get stick from your Conservative colleagues for some of your views?
No. The Conservative Party is very tolerant. I actually greatly admire members of your old party, the Labour Party, who managed to stick to their Catholic faith in a party where that's much harder to do, because certainly abortion is almost a requirement for becoming a Labour MP nowadays, and it's not in the Tory party. There is more tolerance for faith-based views.
A question about you growing up, and you've spoken about being primarily raised by the family's nanny, Veronica Crook. You described her as a formative figure. I just wondered, most people haven't had nannies. So when you're a little boy, do you think, oh gosh, I just want my mum and dad?
No, I'm afraid it was nanny I wanted. If nanny had a day off, I was most put out. It wasn't what I thought should happen at all. And nannies do have to have days off, even sometimes weekends off. And that didn't suit the Jacob Rees-Mogg age 3 and 4 at all. She did a cookery course, the cordon bleu cookery course, and Nanny's a very good cook. She's actually doing the mince pies for a dinner party I'm having shortly.
Really? So you're still in touch with...
Oh, she's looking after my children. So anyway, so she's still very much around. And she went on this cordon bleu cookery course, and I called it the Gordon Blowing cooking course in very cross tones as a little boy, because it meant she was out in the evening, and I thought she shouldn't be. But I was also, my father's dead, but my mother's still alive, very close to my parents. So I was very lucky I had somebody else looking after me as well.
Back to politics. You backed Liz Truss for the leadership. What was the moment, if there was a moment, when you knew that it was all going to go wrong?
There's never quite a moment like that. It just becomes obvious. I thought reversing on the 45p rate was going to make it very difficult to hold things together. I didn't think it would go quite as quickly as it did. Once we got to the has the chief whip resigned or not resigned, then that was clearly all over. I mean, that was very much curtains. But politics is a funny old business. Sometimes things look absolutely certain, and 24 hours later it's all changed again. So until something's happened, it's never definite. But those two things made it pretty likely that it wouldn't go on.
Do you have any regrets about backing her?
It didn't work. So I wish it had worked, but it didn't. One's got to be realistic about that.
Are you happy on the backbenches?
I love the backbenches. I can talk to you. I haven't had somebody banging on at me for half an hour beforehand telling me what I'm supposed to say and what I'm not allowed to say. And I think one of the problems with politics is that the message is controlled in a way that people can't answer the question. And this makes for very stilted interviews. It makes for the very aggressive tone of interviews because people have to draw the information out. And actually, if we weren't trying to be so disciplined, I think people would have a better view of politics. And if, dare I say it, sometimes one said, well, I don't know. Or there are two sides to this argument, and on balance, I'm going this way rather than that way, but there's a perfectly respectable argument the other way. I think all of that is helpful in developing a political dialogue.
So you don't think about a next phase of your political journey? You don't?
I mean, I'm really putting the same question to you. I think people look at political careers and think they're all carefully mapped out early on, but they're not really. Things happen, fortuitous events arise. I ended up being elected for North East Somerset, which is my home seat, which couldn't have been better for me. That's had a strong influence on what I've said in Parliament, what I've been interested in Parliament. And so I think it's much more accidental than that. But I like being a Member of Parliament. I think there's a lot one can do in the House of Commons, and I want to carry on doing that.
So you're standing again, and when you see polling, some polling that suggests you could lose your seat, does it faze you?
Well, I think that's all the more reason to stand again and see if I can turn it round.
What does Jacob Rees-Mogg do to relax? How do you chill out? Do you own a pair of jeans, a pair of joggers?
When I want to relax, I go into the House of Commons and I lie down on the front bench. What else would you do?
You're funny. Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of joggers?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
What do you do for fun?
Well, I enjoy everything I do. I find life is enjoyable, but I've got wife and 6 children. Family life is fabulous. It's great fun, and children are so funny, and the bigger ones become more fully formed, and the little ones lark about. Life is very enjoyable if you're as lucky as I am to have 6 children.
Jacob Rees-Mogg, very much enjoyed this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.